Okay, so you sent over a bunch of stuff on global warming articles, research, snippets, all kinds of things.
Right.
What we really want to do with this deep dive is try to get to like the core understanding of what this issue is all about based on what you sent. What is global warming? Like, how are these sources describing it?
Right.
What are they pointing to as the main like drivers of this whole thing?
Yeah.
What kind of impacts are they highlighting? And maybe most importantly, what actions are they suggesting as potential ways to like, deal with this?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
So, trying to distill it down to something useful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think clarity is what we're aiming for here and connection. So you get the insights from these sources without, getting too bogged down.
Yeah.
The material that you sent over, particularly like the intro from the Heat is On podcast, really frames global warming as this, long-term increase in Earth's average surface temperature. And they immediately link it to human activities.
Okay.
And the burning of fossil fuels really takes center stage.
Right. So it really is about like, what is global warming according to these sources?
Well, at its most basic level, I think it's presented as this significant and sustained increase in the Earth's average surface temperature.
Right.
But what's really emphasized across all this material is the why behind this warming.
Right.
And it's not just attributed to some natural cycles.
Right.
The sources really point directly to human actions and specifically the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas for energy.
Okay. And so the mechanism that connects that is the greenhouse effect.
Precisely.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you break that down a little bit more for us?
Sure. So essentially, when we burn these fuels, right, we release substantial amounts of gases into the atmosphere, most notably carbon dioxide or CoCar.
Yes.
And along with other gases, these create a kind of blanket around the Earth. And sunlight passes through this blanket, warming the surface.
Okay.
But then these greenhouse gases trap some of the heat that would otherwise radiate back out into space.
Right.
So it's a natural process.
That's a natural process.
Absolutely. It's essential for life on Earth as we know it.
Right.
But the issue that the sources highlight is that the increased concentration of these gases due to human activity is trapping excess heat, leading to this warming trend.
So it's sort of like we've, thrown another blanket on the bed.
Yeah, exactly.
Often it's already warm enough.
Yeah, it's like turning up the thermostat, when you're already comfortable.
Yeah. And
then it gets too hot.
Yeah. And what really struck me in the material was the amount of agreement around this.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't presented as some fringe theory.
Absolutely.
Or some minority opinion.
Yeah. The sources repeatedly underscore that climate patterns have been studied rigorously for decades now.
Yeah.
This isn't based on, a few isolated studies.
Yeah.
It's a vast body of research from around the world.
Yeah.
And the data consistently shows this clear and rapid warming trend that aligns with the increase in greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah. And they specifically said, the last decade was the hottest on record.
Yeah.
That was like a pretty stark statement.
It is. It kind of moves it from something abstract to something very real.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we understand what global warming is and the primary driver as outlined in these sources.
Yeah.
Now, what are the actual effects? Like, what are we seeing?
Well, the material really paints a picture of impacts that are already being observed globally.
Okay.
And one of the most significant, and I think visually striking, is the rise in sea levels.
Right.
And this is directly attributed to the melting of glaciers and polar ice caps, which adds more water to the oceans.
Right.
And the sources specifically mention major coastal cities like Miami, Jakarta, Venice, facing increased risks of flooding. And that's a very real and immediate consequence for millions of people.
Yeah, and it's not just about the rising water, is it?
No, it's not.
They talk about more extreme weather events.
Yeah. The sources really point to an increase in the frequency and intensity of certain types of extreme weather.
Right.
Like more severe and prolonged heat waves. We're seeing stronger hurricanes and cyclones.
Yeah.
And this alarming rise in devastating wildfires in various parts of the world.
Yeah.
And they suggest a clear link between this overall warming trend and these more volatile weather patterns.
So looking at the even bigger picture, it's not just these dramatic events.
Right.
They're talking about pretty significant disruptions to natural ecosystems.
Absolutely. The natural world is under immense pressure from these changes.
Right.
Animal species are struggling to adapt to these rapidly changing conditions, leading to habitat loss and, in some cases, population declines.
Right.
The sources talk about widespread coral reef bleaching due to warmer ocean temperatures, which is devastating for marine biodiversity. And, you know, we all think of those images of polar bears losing their ice hunting grounds. That's highlighted as a stark example. And these changes, you know, they ripple through entire food chains, creating instability.
And importantly, the sources don't shy away from the impacts on human health.
No, they don't.
And that's something we all need to be aware of.
Absolutely. I think that's a critical aspect. The material points to several ways global warming is affecting human health. Increased air pollution, often linked to, you know, the burning of fossil fuels and wildfires, obviously has respiratory consequences. More frequent and intense heat waves pose direct health risks. Particularly for vulnerable populations. There's concern about the potential spread of, you know, diseases like malaria and dengue fever, as warmer temperatures and altered rainfall patterns can expand the range of disease-carrying insects. So the point is, these aren't just, you know, abstract environmental problems. They're very real and increasing consequences for human well-being in communities all over the world.
So having laid out this problem and all of its impacts, as these sources describe them, what do they offer as potential solutions?
Well, the tone shifts a bit here, offering the sense of cautious optimism that action can still make a difference. They emphasize that while the challenges are significant, there are pathways forward. And these involve efforts at multiple levels, from individual choices to government policies to international cooperation.
So let's start with those individual actions. Like, what can we do in our own lives to reduce carbon emissions?
Well, they highlight several practical steps. Transitioning to renewable energy sources like solar and wind power is key, both at the household level and on a larger scale. They talk about improving energy efficiency in our homes and appliances to reduce energy consumption. And rethinking our transportation habits. Opting for public transport, cycling, electric vehicles when possible. These are all ways to lower our carbon footprint.
And they also talk about supporting sustainable businesses. How does that play into all of this?
Well, by choosing to support companies that are, you know, prioritizing environmentally sound practices, we as consumers send a strong signal to the market. It encourages businesses to adopt more sustainable methods and innovate in greener technologies, knowing that there's demand for it. So it's a way to kind of vote with our wallets.
What about the role of government and like larger systemic changes?
Well, the sources really emphasize that individual actions alone are not enough. We need significant policy changes. This includes things like, you know, governments implementing regulations to limit emissions, investing in renewable energy infrastructure, and supporting international agreements on climate action.
And, you know, the sources also point out the importance of citizens getting involved. Voting for leaders who prioritize these issues.
Absolutely. That's a crucial part of it.
And it was interesting that they also talked about the role of nature itself. Like trees and forests.
Yes, nature actually provides us with a powerful tool in this fight. Forests act as natural carbon sinks. They absorb a substantial amount of co-euros from the atmosphere. So preventing deforestation and engaging in like forestation efforts. These are really vital strategies for mitigating climate change.
So using nature as a solution as well.
Exactly.
And finally, they touched on the importance of education and just raising awareness.
Education is absolutely fundamental because it empowers individuals to understand the issue and make informed decisions in their own lives. And advocate for broader change. Increased awareness can also build public support for these policies and foster this greater sense of urgency and collective responsibility.
So if we're going to pull all this together, it seems like the message from these sources is that fighting global warming is really about protecting our future. Like our homes.
Or health.
The well-being of generations to come.
Exactly. And the other thing they all seem to agree on is that we're not powerless.
Right.
Like, we do have the ability to take action.
We have the knowledge.
Yeah.
The technologies are developing rapidly. And ultimately, we have the power to make choices
Right.
that can lead to a more sustainable future.
Yeah. And that's what makes me think, thinking about everything we've just talked about.
From rising sea levels to extreme weather to, disruption of ecosystems to the risks to human health.
Yeah.
What single action do you think could create the most, far-reaching positive ripple effect?
That's a really good question.
It's something to think about.
Yeah, it is.
After this deep dive.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate you coming on.
Glad to be here.